I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to Conversations with Al McFarlane. Today, we typically focus on business and economic development. We're pleased to continue in that vein today. Thank you for joining the program on YouTube, and I believe we're going to be streaming live as well to Facebook. We also write stories about these interviews or from these interviews. My colleague Brenda Gray is on the call as a reporter scribe, and together we try to bring what we call robust conversations to you in our online audiences, our radio audiences, and our newspaper audiences. Pleased to have in the program today two friends of mine, two leaders in the community. One, Peter McLaughlin. He now leads the program called LISC. LISC is, I'm trying to read the full and proper name, Peter, and you just told us when we Local Initiatives Support Corporation. We'll tell you what that means in a minute. And also in the call is Alfredo Martel. Alfredo Martel is CEO and president of MEDA, a storied and powerful business development organization doing innovative things in Twin Cities and around the country. Also in the call, we will introduce and talk with Patrick Parsono. He is involved with lending and consulting at MEDA. We thank him for being on the call, and we're expecting one more person through the course of the program. I want to begin with Peter McLaughlin. Peter, let me tell about you for a second. Peter McLaughlin was a longtime Hennepin County commissioner and spent 28 years on the county board. Now, as we said, he's executive director of the LISC organization. LISC is the local arm of a national nonprofit that's invested over $700 million to catalyze local opportunities for Twin Cities residents. When he represented South and Southeast Minneapolis on the county board, he helped lead a range of important efforts, including expansion of the region's transit network, transit-oriented development along the emerging light rail lines, and community investment programs that spurred new businesses and jobs. His work on multiple community partnerships in the Phillips and Cedar Riverside neighborhoods along the Midtown Greenway were a signature part of his work. I think this description is a little bit modest. I think that, like me, people would say that Peter McLaughlin is the dean, the brain, the power behind urban transit in Twin Cities, and sort of the visionary that brought awareness to and movement to adopt mass transit, light rail transit in Minnesota, here in Twin Cities. Peter, thank you for being here. How are you doing? Unmute your mic and join the conversation. How are you doing, Peter?
I'm doing fine given the circumstances. Personally, doing fine. My family's healthy, and we're just trying to make our way through this craziness that's going on right now. But we're doing. I think we're. I'm hoping we're poised to make a leap forward here. It's a tough time, but we've got to make sure that we use this moment to right. leap forward. And thank you for the generous introduction, by the way. On the
well, not generous enough, Peter. You really are a giant and a hero and a genuine force for good for our community. A great public servant and leader. So I want to thank you on behalf of all the people that I know and have touched and reached out with, or work with in the community for your history of fairness, even-handedness, of advocacy, the spirit of inclusion that you brought to your leadership in Hennepin County, and for what you've continued to do. And I do that with just sincerity. So thank you, Peter McLaughlin.
Thank you very much.
So let's give people LISC 101. What's the value proposition, the vision and mission of the Local Initiatives Support Corporation?
So LISC was started over 40 years ago by the Ford with the help of the Ford Foundation. The design of LISC is to try to bring capital to people, places, and projects that don't get adequate access to capital through the normal channels of banking and investment. And so the idea was to get those investments out into communities of color. The African American community was a priority at the beginning and remains a priority. And so we invest in people, that would be entrepreneurs, and developers of color, for example, places, special places like East 38th or West Broadway, and then projects, whether that be affordable housing projects or community institutions. The $700 million figure, we just got the update on that. That's local investment. There are 37 local offices around the country. LISC locally was started 30 years ago, and our total investments now are not the 700 million. We just updated those numbers. It's almost $1 billion that we've invested, and nationally, that's been an investment of over $20 billion. And so we're trying to move capital. If we're going to change the nature of the American economy and the structure of opportunity in this community, we've got to start moving capital in different ways, and that's what LISC is trying to do.
So let's talk about what the barriers have been for capital, creating and making capital available to Black and minority entrepreneurs, to minority residents. What have been the barriers?
Well, if the history of entrepreneurship in this country, a lot of it is driven by entrepreneurs with a great idea, and they'll put their house up. They'll take a loan based on the house that they own. Well, we know what the history of access to housing and home ownership has been for the Black community in this country. It's a history of discrimination and racism. And so that resource is not there. And so, you don't get, oftentimes businesses, when they're starting up, they don't get a loan from a bank. They actually pledge, their house or other resources that they have available. And those resources were systemically denied the growth of those was systemically denied to the Black community. So we have to overcome that. In addition to that, the networks, I think about Black developers who are trying to get into the market. And there are a number of them here in the Twin Cities, and we've been working with them, but their networks are not the same as the majority developers. The white developers have this network, a social network, a professional network, and frankly, a finance network. And the new developers who are emerging don't have that access. And that's about, again, access to capital, but it's also about access to wisdom and advice. And so we need to build on that. And that's one of the things we have to do. But that's a barrier, a clear barrier. Alfredo can talk about this all afternoon as well. So that's really what those barriers are. And if we're going to move capital, we have to change those structures. We've got to find a way to overcome those kinds of barriers. And, getting that first project done is a big deal. If you can't get the first one done, then you're kind of spinning your wheels. But if you get the first one done, then all of a sudden you walk in, you talk to somebody, say, look, like I did this, we got it over the finish line. And one of the things that we think is absolutely essential right now is to help work with those entrepreneurs and those developers to get them over the finish line for that first project. And then they can go and expand and do what they need to do.
Right now, our community and the country are dealing with two pandemics. Obviously, there's the COVID-19 pandemic. It's really had an impact on business and consumer personal life at every level. Nobody's untouched by the impact of COVID-19. It's a great disruptor. But for many of us, we say that's in addition to the ongoing pandemic of 1619. For some, they'd say the pandemic of 1492. It depends on where you're starting. And so the question, Peter McLaughlin, is how have these concurrent pandemics created both a new awareness about pervasive, expansive disparities, both in health and wealth? And are they both leading us to examine differently the things you've described and to commit ourselves to innovation and creating new access, new relationships, and new opportunities to build and rebuild society? What do you think?
Well, let me go to the kind of the end of my comment first, mm-hmm. And that is, this is a moment when big change is possible because of the level of awareness of things that we've understood for a long time has been going on. but there's a broader awareness. There's an urgency that is more pervasive in this society than there has been in a long time. And the critical thing is we need to take advantage of that, because this is a time when big change is possible to eliminate the gaps in the racial gaps in America, but they don't just happen. They don't just happen with speeches. They don't just happen by pointing at it. We've got to make it happen. We've got to make it happen. And those of us who are in the field, whether it be in the media or in running nonprofits or in the public sector or the private sector, we've got to act. We've got to make sure that we're taking actions that are going to change the nature of American society and the nature of opportunity in the American society. And so that's what I think we've got. I think the level of pervasiveness of the understanding is as high as it's been since the civil rights movement, and I'm old enough to remember that. And so there is you listen to corporations talking in a different way, and they're examining what they're doing in terms of hiring, in terms of investments that they're making. That it's not just their foundation; it's their corporate capital and how that's being deployed in our society. We've got, banks that are saying, okay, we've got this portfolio. It's not earning much money right now because it's there's not in terms of the cash that they've got, but some of it's invested in real estate, but it's kind of real estate, all over the country. And so let's think about how can they as a bank invest strategically in real estate in communities that need that kind of investment. So that, to me, that's the opportunity, the chance that we have right now. But there's no guarantee we're going to get over the finish line. There's no finish line, actually. This is a struggle forever. But this is a moment to make structural changes, systemic changes that can make a difference now and into the future. You know me, I'm an optimist. I've been in this business because I believe you can make change and make it better. So that's what I believe, Al.
Well, think about this, and I'll come back to you with a question. I've been looking at the history of what happened after slavery in this country, that brief period of Reconstruction, and the deal that was made in Washington that moved Black people back into a de facto or what actually amounted to new slavery, Jim Crow. And so both political parties had a hand in the deal. So I'll come back to that. I want you to think about, is there any similarity, and it's not the same thing, between where we are now and the deal making that's happening at the Capitol and the pressure that was applied at the Capitol? Does that situation parallel? Does it teach us anything for the future? Think about it for a second. I'll come back to you. And I want to go to Alfredo Martel. Alfredo, good afternoon. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having us.
I've been a META fan and a META client. You don't know this, but I was one of the first clients of META when META was first created back, I think, it must have been 74, 75, right?
Yeah.
Was that the year Charles Poe was the first executive director, and I've been involved with META off and on, either as a client or as a reporter. But I know the organization, and I tell you how much I value what you do. It's a great organization. But let me have you give META 101 for people who might not know about your organization, your vision, and your mission.
Wow. Well, as a one-year CEO in this call with you, Peter and Patrick, I feel like you guys can do that for me. But I'll give it a go. META was, as we mentioned, born in 1971 as a corporate community response to the Plymouth Avenue riots or unrest. So we have had business entrepreneurship and corporate partnership at the core since the foundation of the organization. We have, sadly, with the events of 2020, all of them, pandemic, unrest, you name it, we now enter our 50th anniversary, and we sort of say, META was born 50 years ago of this very moment. this very moment was the catalyst for the creation of an organization such as META, a remarkable organization such as META. Our operating model is pretty straightforward. We understand three core areas of systemic, intentional, or unintentional blockage for business entrepreneurship from BIPOC entrepreneurs. First one is awareness, technical assistance, business capabilities, etc. So we provide technical assistance, management consultancy. One of the things that in that management consultancy we're looking to expand is, to Peter's point, which I think is so powerful, is social capital. We're looking to convert our business consultancy from a one-on-one business management consultancy into what we call the VAN, get on the VAN, the Virtual Accelerator Network, which will pair volunteers from corporate America and provide technical assistance, coaching, mentorship to our BIPOC entrepreneurs, not just giving each other technical assistance, but creating connections, human connections of social capital. I know your first name, I know your second name, I know your wife's name, I know your kids, I know where you live, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. The second thing we provide is money. Clearly, I brought with me the talent. Patrick Pariseau is the mega mover of capital at META. He is knee deep in PPP right now. So he'll have something to say about that. I think he's smiling because he feels good. He's doing good right now. But capital is the second part of it. We're a CDFI, a community development financial institution. We got a portfolio currently of over $23 million in lending, and we're deploying probably double, perhaps triple that as we come to the close of 2021. And then finally, markets, access to markets, contracts. We also have an arm of our organization called Twin Cities Ascend Twin Cities, which pairs BIPOC entrepreneurs with corporations or state contracts that make a good, solid match. The other area that we do is we take businesses that are interested in pursuing those contracts and we coach them up, we scale them up financially so that when we go to that RFP, they are turnkey potential winners. So management consultancy, money, markets.
Let me say this about you from your resume notes, so that people who are listening understand that you are the son of Cuban exiles born in San Juan, Puerto Rico.
Sí, señor.
Claro.
I moved to Minnesota for the weather.
Como yo soy medio cubano también, tú sabes.
Claro.
I'm also a Cuban, first generation American. My father was actually born in Cuba. And you know, y de vez en cuando hablamos en español en estos programas. Perfecto. Y cuando tengo la oportunidad, me gusta usar nuestro idioma para invitar la gente mundial, todo el mundo, en esta conversación. ¿Me entiende?
Excelente, perfecto.
Bueno, pues,
anytime you want a Spanish podcast, you call me.
Okay, good. Well, so, you know, you've had 30 years of business and marketing experience before taking the helm at META. You worked for companies like Caribou Coffee and KFC and Yum Brands, Inc. You were with Caribou from 2008 to 2016 with a leading role in redirecting its brand strategy. And you were Senior Vice President of Marketing when you started. And by the time you left, you were the Senior Vice President of Marketing and Product Management, bringing just a valuable role to developing new products for the company. You also were the Strategic Communications and Marketing Manager for Walker Art Center, and you led the museum's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Task Force. You've been a board chair for the Brand Lab, which is a nonprofit that works to diversify the advertising and marketing industry. And your organization, META, as you indicated, has played a role in getting more than 500 businesses off the ground. So I could go on and on. I can attest to the value of the Ascend initiative. I am one of the first members of the cohort of the Ascend program, and I tell you, it's a program that helps people like me take our businesses to the next level. And the guidance, the engagement, the hands-on ness of your team. People like your colleague there, Patrick Pariseau, is absolutely invaluable. And so I want to thank you personally, number one, as an entrepreneur and a business leader, for the value you bring to my business and businesses like of people like me. Thank you so much. Let me bring Patrick in. Patrick, good afternoon, and thank you for being here. And the question of the hour is PPP. Explain it, and where are we now for entrepreneurs? You have to unmute, Patrick.
Rookie move.
Get it off of me. There we go. My button wasn't working. So Al, it's always good to see you. So we're very proud to have you as a client of META. And Peter, we've worked with LISC for years. So we're very fortunate to have you around. So please, I extend a thanks to both your organizations and the podcast for inviting us. PPP is becoming one of the big entities of COVID through the deal on support of business, and one of the things that we realized at META is that when we started this program and through COVID, it was very difficult because business was be shuttered, set down from that standpoint. And, back in the Great Recession that we had, we lost a lot of businesses just for the fact that there was no care being done by the government from bringing forward PPP loans. And a lot of people are resistant to them, or they don't know exactly what they are from this point. And what we saw in the first two money grabs, I call them the money grabs because people were going crazy over PPP from that standpoint, that everybody was rushing to the bank to get the money, to be able to use it. The forgiveness thing was very attractive. It was the first time that SBA came out with a product that really hit two businesses effectively from that standpoint. And then we saw all the waves of problems. The big businesses were gathering the money. It didn't get down to the levels that we saw in PPP that we needed to. META, we stopped. We didn't have capital available because, again, that capital issue you were talking about for businesses was not available to us because people weren't lending us money at that point. So we really stepped into a mode of technical assistance and really went in to try and take BIPOC businesses and find them really a stabilization tool that didn't put risk into the marketplace to allow them to stabilize during a real pandemic. So that was really hard for people to understand how that would work. There's a lot of confusion on that, but we really put a movement together at META to be able to answer questions, walk people through the application processes that were there from that standpoint. The thing for us is the money was coming from different sources and banks, and we have great banking relationships. We're not an organization that doesn't talk to community banks, doesn't talk to big banks about issues that happen with BIPOC businesses. So we understand those barriers and those roadblocks. So PP was a good way, when we look at the success that happened in businesses in the first round. But immediately after that, we realized that, boy, we missed the mark. Across the country, BIPOC businesses received about 15% of that money. Believe it or not, on our surveys that we did with META, we hit 70%. That was a big number that people came to us and said, how did you do that? How did you get there? Well, we have a client base. We specialize in entrepreneurs of color. So that for us was exclusive. So we had a big customer base that we could tap to, but still, we didn't see those dollars going to the real need out there. So here we go. Fast forward, and now we're into it again. And SBA comes up and says, we're going to put another $245 billion into the program, but this time we're going to do it right. So we said, okay, great, here we are. So in the meantime, Alfredo, myself and other folks went out and found some money. So we're ready to go, so we got it all together. And we thought we'd get a little lead time here, but, with the state of the country and the status that it was in, they said, we're going to get this out quick. So as of last Thursday, we got a surprise and said, guess what? You guys are open on Monday. And to help BIPOC businesses, you get a free week. You get to get applications out ahead of everybody else. And we'll make sure that you guys get some money to be able to get out to BIPOC businesses. And it's a little different program. It allows for you to have a second draw, they call it, that's the terminology, which is an existing PPP loan already. But because of the length of the pandemic and COVID, nobody realized that we probably needed another round to sustain these businesses. We're still in that emergency mode with a lot of businesses. So they put that in place. And then we really went after the first time people that didn't get a PPP. If most people remember, if you were waiting in line at some of the bigger banks, I won't mention any names, but you could have been 20,000 or 30,000 back as a BIPOC owner. The likelihood of you getting in that pool of money in that first round was probably slim to none. You know, my dad used to say, I'd at least like to get in the hat. You know, I'm not even going to get in the hat. So along that way, we saw some real problems. So we saw some changes, and then the forgiveness side of that is coming up through that. So again, here we come again. We're still in the same pandemic, and we need this stabilization again. And one of our key factors is to really stabilize the business so we don't lose them. That's our first step. Our second step then is to get them on solid ground. That might be even. And our third step then is to expand them, because we think COVID does give this opportunity. So a long way around it is we're now in opportunity land again, under the same terms and conditions, except for the fact that people have to prove that they had a loss of 25% or more from 19 to 2020. And they can do that either quarterly or an annually process. There's some paperwork that needs to be involved in that. But at that point, then we have a second round of PPP. They took the maximum dollar down to 2 million, under 500 people businesses, still some large businesses, but giving us that break. So just to give you an idea, on Monday we had 117 applications. The ones we get, we know are BIPOC businesses. So we're saying that does have an effect from that standpoint. We're moving through these as quickly as possible. As of the 19th, you're going to see the banks come on board and some of the other folks from that standpoint. So for us, we're taking on BIPOC business owners. We're getting referrals because, again, going back to that earlier comment about capital, there's only about 4 or 5 real CDFIs in the state of Minnesota that have access to this capital to be able to really get directly to the BIPOC businesses. So our team is all hands on the deck for the last 3 days. We've got a system to go through. People can call us, get us information, ask questions. We have subject matter experts. There's 2 sets of applications. There's one for if you had a PP, one if you didn't. So of course, we always think that we're going to clean this up and make it more, a little bit easier to understand. And as we get through it, it becomes more complicated. So that's what we're here for. We specialize in this TA. We'll take calls from anybody from that standpoint, or other folks to try and help on that BIPOC side. And occasionally we'll get a person that calls that just needs information. We're going to pass that on, get them to the right place, because we'd like every business owner. It's not only the BIPOC businesses that need help. We understand that the white population businesses also are there. But I think this go around, we're tracking very closely. So later on, when we have another podcast after March and we can kind of tell you what those numbers are.
Fantastic, fantastic. Patrick Paraso is the Vice President of Lending and Consulting at MEDA, but he knows what he's talking about from the banking point of view. Patrick is the former founder and president of Brickwell Community Bank, which is headquartered in Woodbury. So, Patrick, what's the difference between the PPP loan program and the EIDL, Economic Injury Disaster Loan, and take a second too to talk about Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Emergency Lending Program, DEED, Department of Economic
Well, Al,
Economic
you all
Development.
my hotspots here.
Sure.
Alfredo stole my thunder on Van and some of the other places, so at least I get to talk a little bit about what happened. So initially, when we saw emergency and COVID coming out, the SBA responded very quickly to a program called the Emergency EIDL Loan, which was a different program, a little more of a loan type process. Is not that getting from PPP. They extended that for another year. There is some limits in there. They asked for a personal guarantee from the standpoint on the loan. The one advantage of an EIDL loan is the fact that it is a 20-year term. So you got 3.5% interest. So you can lengthen that loan way out from that process. And it's another source of loan capital for businesses that can apply to it. The process initially started in the first round, had some wrinkles. We overwhelmed the system in the first day. SBA blew all the gaskets out of their processing system. So that stopped, and then performed from this program to another program. They didn't have enough money in it, went along that line, but it's still a great source. That is an opportunity for lending that's a little bit longer term. You get that longer term on it. It looks more familiar to a commercial loan is my best example on that.
Mhm.
During the first line of fire on PPP that we had, if you had an EIDL loan, you applied for it and you didn't get approved, they gave you the money for your employees up to $10,000 as a grant. But if you did get approved and you had a PPP, you had to deduct that. This go around, the EIDL is still out there. It got extended for a year, but now it's exempt. It's not included in the PPP total. So you can technically have both of those loans. So if you don't want the PPP because of the short term that the PPP has, you can go to the EIDL or you can take on both. The PPP loan, that is a situation that offers forgiveness, right? You get to go in, you get 75 up to 80% based on your employees on payroll to get forgiveness from that program. You file your paperwork. That really becomes a grant or free money into your business to help you run it. And then at the end of the day, you're probably going to have to pay some taxes on that. We don't have that solved yet, but we think there's going to be some provisions on there. But that's a great program for businesses to really avoid this big capital burden on that. That program doesn't have a personal guarantee on it from that standpoint. So it's a little easier on the eyes if something goes wrong and you have to default on that loan, you probably don't have that problem in there. The quicker side of that equation is you're directly going to a bank or CDFI for the PPP loan. So that gets processed by somebody you can touch, feel, wave to, say hi to from that standpoint if you need that, and you can get comments and go consulting. The EIDL loan goes directly to the SBA, so you're not involved with a bank on that standpoint. You're dealing with an application online to the SBA. There's a processing period where they go through their underwriting process. And normally what has happened is it's taken a little bit longer to get that process from that standpoint in accordance to the PPP. Does that help? You want more on that? You know me.
No, that's great. The last one on my list for you was Minnesota's Department of Employment and Economic Development emergency lending. Where are we with that?
The state of Minnesota stepped up to the plate. What they put out initially when they shuttered down bars, restaurants, gymnasiums from that standpoint, they came back with a loan program that was up to $35,000. Very similar to the PPP on the event that it does get forgiveness after 2 years. It was around a 60-month program that's in effect. They put in $30 million, gave it out to most of the nonprofits. Those dollars we know went to the small business holders because of the small dollar amount.
Mm-hmm.
We were able to jump in on that program as META was one of the lead candidates at the state at the DEED program, which managed that particular deal. And for those who don't know DEED, it's a wing of the state of Minnesota that provides small business access to different programs, education, funding, and different programs through programs. So each year DEED has a certain dollar amount allocated in a line item budget that they can send out in the form to nonprofit organizations to make a loan to Al McFarlane's business on the small business side from that equation. So it gives businesses a small leap that's subsidized by the state. That program whipped through that money, I'll be honest with you, in under 5 weeks. It was very quick, $35,000 out. I think we put a big portion of those loans out to help the state out because we wanted to get it out fast.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we had over 600 applications. We were able to do about 90 of them to 100 of them before we ran out of money. Then we had the stimulus package come in, which granted money to the state, which was the COVID stimulus package. And the state came back with another program that was a little larger from that standpoint in total dollar amount, which was a grant program that offered $10,000 to the leftover businesses that didn't get it on the first round on that particular loan. It was a $10,000 grant. That ended up in rural and half 50-50 between the state, right around 60 million, 30 million for 7-county metro and 30 up. People applied for that loan. Again, a phenomenal response in the state of Minnesota. They had over 12,000 applications. We were able to do 6,000. So as you can see, on all of these programs, we still have the shortages going out for small businesses. And really where we suffer is in the BIPOC end of that particular business is if they're not quick to make their application or they're a little unsure of themselves because they might be an immigrant within their business and not sure how the programs work. We find that educational process and that technical assistance a key component for us to be successful within our business, because that's what we offer. It's not a fear factor. It's not an embarrassment. It's none of those things. If you come and talk to us, we're going to steer you in the right direction. And we want you to be able to get this money and have access to it, both the PPP, the EIDL, the state programs. And we expect the state to come back. They just recently put an issue out for 200 million that's going out to the counties, as I understand it. We haven't seen the details on that. I think we're kind of waiting on that to see as we get through PPP, because PPP is supposed to end in March. And as the counties come out with this additional money, we think we can get that money to the right places. We assist also the counties in trying to find leads to be able to do that. And at META, we have all of these sources in a group. And at one point, I think Peter would tell you that if you looked at all of the sources of money that was available, people got fatigued on how to do that. And my only advice to everybody that's listening on this, when in doubt, apply, and apply often, and apply everywhere. You cannot take advantage of enough applications and money. We have a very good client of ours that actually went out and hired a person just to start filling out applications and grants. Really? It was very successful at it. So
amazing.
When I talk, you remember I'm an old guy from northern Minnesota and a hockey player, and I didn't get this nose from not going into corners. The idea behind this is to make sure that you're applying. When in doubt, ask. And that's all I can say, and I'll leave you with that. If you don't ask, you're not going to see it. My mom used to say that to me all the time. If you don't ask your dad for $5 because you know he's not ever going to give it to you, one of these days he's going to pull out his wallet and say, you had a chance.
So the 900 million is the money that the feds just put out, but the expectation is that the new administration might bring an additional $2 trillion for a $3 trillion investment. Does that sound right to you? Feasible, doable?
Yep. So we know that Mr. Biden has learned, President Biden has learned that from his previous tenure as vice president, it's go big or be gone, right? We are hearing rumors that this money, we're actually seeing an allocation of this first 900 billion going specifically to BIPOC business owners in the CDFI world, which covers low income and in other areas. That 3 billion is getting allocated in this year. We think as we go through the legislature again, we're going to see some big numbers coming out. Now, that could go to unemployment stimulus checks again, things like that. We're hoping that our legislator becomes creative and starts thinking about where this money is best served. We think it's, of course, at CDFIs and other organizations, because we know we get that money to the right place and we know we can get it down to that level. Although a lot of us at CDFIs don't have the same resources as US Bank and Wells Fargo to be able to put that money on the table. So we also need their help. We also need their assistance. We're not counting them out, but we hope that somebody will talk to us and say, how do we get this out in this place? Because that need is definitely there. I think
Go ahead, Peter.
I think you might have heard this, that 70% of the small business of color in this country at one point during COVID probably were at the point of going out of business within 4 weeks.
Peter?
So I just wanted to emphasize the point that Patrick's comments illustrated, and that is, the state can do a lot, and they have done a lot. Local governments can do a lot, but the only government that can do something at an adequate scale is the federal government, because they can borrow the money. State budget has to be balanced every year. They've made some major investments, but they're looking at a deficit in their next biennial budget. And so there are real limits of what local and state government can do. And so the engagement of the federal government is an essential part here. And so that's critically important, and we've got to make sure that happens. And I think President Biden will do just that. So that's the only way we're going to get to scale. I mean, the local money runs out really, really fast. And the focus in the second and third rounds of the packages that the federal government put together, they actually set aside money for CDFIs, so that are community-based investors. That's critically important to make sure that the communities of color can participate fully with those resources.
So, Alfredo Martel, it sounds like we're at a place where there's a convergence. Number one, the proper and appropriate response of the federal government, translated through state and county, platforms, but also, as you mentioned, a new awareness and sensitivity in the corporate arena. And it seems to me that one of the things that you are doing effectively is affording, supporting, enabling corporate interests to engage in ways that they simply want to do and want to do more of, right? And connect them at a time when what they can do is really needed and can be transformative, not only for the marketplace, but for their own businesses, and has double, triple, quadruple impact because the resources, the capital, what do you call it? It's not the right word for it, but capital is there that wasn't there before
Right.
through the federal government. So what does that mean for you in terms of opportunity, Alfredo?
Yeah. Well, as I said, one of the things, as I entered META, the famous line, right? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. So the 3M model with management, consultancy, money, and markets is basically just certainly being intensified at META. We're putting digital resources against it. One of the things that has made us very successful in the lending and the money deployment arm that Patrick leads is the fact that we had an enterprise banking system. So we had a virtual bank at the ready to go, right? So no papers, no documents in analog form, paper, no printing, everything was digital. Even the disbursements were electronic disbursements. So that made us very efficient deployer of capital in a non-human contact environment, right? We like to say that strategically, we want to be META in the middle, but what we want to be, imagine this. We all know eBay. eBay basically is a connector of two parties with a mutual interest, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in the middle is eBay connecting the customer with a seller. So we see ourselves as looking at our clients, bringing as many clients as we can and moving them into our integrated services of the 3Ms. And then on the other side, we see corporate America, and we see what we call anchors in terms of supplier diversity. And corporate America has sort of, looked to themselves. First of all, I think to Peter's point, there's been a reckoning of, holy smokes, what have we been doing?
Mm-hmm.
Because what we've been doing, celebrating 5% supplier diversity, ain't it, right? And what we've experienced is a lot of corporations coming to us and like, how do we help? What can we do? And the reality is that if you're a professional services organization with 100 volunteers, we want to take you and place you where you can do most impact. So play to your strengths, right? So if you're a lawyer, help us with your legal capabilities. If you're an accountant, we're going to recruit you to do accounting support for our clients. We're not going to ask you to do something out of your area of expertise, right? And no knock to other endeavors, Habitat for Humanity and other things are fantastic, but we have corporations saying, how do we help and make maximum impact? And in a way, we've sort of been corralling this awareness and this reckoning and directing it through two areas: the Volunteer Accelerator Network, where we'll pair up their core competencies with the needs of our clients, and in the Ascend Twin Cities program, where large corporations are saying, we have been trying so hard to find qualified BIPOC businesses to bring into our supply chain. And every year we struggle with breaking the 6% threshold or the 8% threshold, you name it. So one of the things that we've done is we've looked at these corporations that want to improve, and we look at them as clients too. So when we shift that lens and we say, what are the problems that we know you want to do well, we know you want to do good, we know you want to be part of the solution, but you keep banging your head against the same methods. So let's change the methods. And that's how we're now looking at some of these supplier diversity initiatives and consultancy volunteer initiatives from the eye of the volunteer, from the perspective of the anchor. I want to have 20% supply diversity, but I never break through 6. What's wrong? And that's where we feel that if we're in the middle, serving as that sort of almost connective tissue between the two, we can create a very efficient model of operating in our space that maximizes the impact of the corporate America and all the volunteers that want to help, and maximize the number of clients that they can actually impact. So that if you think about it, that eBay model is very efficient, almost no friction in the middle. That's what we're trying to be. We're trying to be just the wire conducting the electricity back and forth.
So Al, we're trying to do something on ownership, because we think that ownership in communities of color is the cornerstone of any kind of recovery, any kind of rebuilding that's going to be different and better. We just don't want to rebuild the way it was, and ownership is at the heart of that. If we go back to the recession, the Great Recession in 08 and 09, what happened? We lost thousands of Black homeowners. That capital was wiped out. There was money that came in from the coasts that grabbed these properties and put people at a disadvantage, and they got off of the capital escalator that home ownership is. We want to make sure there's money sitting on the coast right now, and there are problems with small businesses and critical pieces of property in areas that were damaged in the uprising, areas that were damaged with the recession that came from COVID. And so we need to make sure that, that there's capital available to allow for community ownership. And so we've tried to we're working with Hennepin County, we're working with JP Morgan Chase, Minneapolis Foundation to create what we're calling the CAT Fund, which is financing to allow for interim community ownership of critical parcels that can then be sold to community owners and operators. If we miss this opportunity, if these parcels get lost and they're owned by REITs on the coast, that is going to be a totally missed opportunity to change the nature of the economy here. So we're putting that fund in place. We're working with the community on West Broadway, on Lake Street, on 38th to try to identify what these critical properties are, and trying to find interim owners. And we're working with the Land Bank as one of our partners. And we're trying to make sure that we don't miss that opportunity, because eliminating the gap in ownership, that's a big step toward eliminating the long-term economic gaps that exist, racial gaps that exist in this country.
I want to finish the program shifting the focus to what's happening in D.C. right now. As we speak, President Trump is being impeached by the House of Representatives, and we all witness ugliness, no other way to name it. Last week at the Capitol, when mobs stormed the Capitol and desecrated the seat of government for our country, and I think in a frightening way made us look at the fragility of the liberty and freedom and the democracy that we have. Peter, I started off asking you to think about reflecting on where we are right now, the forces that appear to be at play in the context of what happened after Reconstruction. And I'm not sure if you're the historian or not.
I do pay attention to that. And I'm glad you brought it up.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. And the idea, not to be negative or sour, but my intent is to be thoughtful, provocative, informative, and alert all of us to what we have to pay attention to so that we are successful in creating the kind of community that we both want and deserve for every American.
So the end of Reconstruction essentially was the Hayes v. Tilden deal in 1876 that you mentioned. And that was a deal. The Republicans got to keep the presidency with Rutherford B. Hayes, and the Democrats got the end of Reconstruction. This was back when civil rights positions were reversed between the parties. So, but to go back, how did this start? And then you get the Jim Crow century after that. Violence was at the heart of that. I mean, what happened in Reconstruction, you had the Klan and other organizations, white organizations in the South that were terrorizing people. They were, and that was at the heart of the rebellion that was going on there. This thing that happened this past week was another attempt to use violence and the intimidation that comes with violence to reverse the political course of the nation. They failed. And the quick action, I was applauding when they decided when McConnell and Pelosi decided they were going to take that vote that night. Didn't care whether it was the middle of the night or not. That had to happen. Mm-hmm. And so they've pushed back. But Trump was trying to use that old model of violence and intimidation in order to retain the presidency and to create a new politics going forward. I'm hoping that is going to be pushed back, and I think it's essential that it be pushed back with official action like the impeachment. If this election had been closer, I fear I was rooting for Biden to run up the numbers, because that gave us some more breathing room that I think was critical. But this is an old playbook. I mean, violence has been a part of the American political system, remains a part of the American political system. And so we've got to acknowledge it, and we got to push back on it.
Any comments, Alfredo? Any thoughts?
I just think, so thank you for those comments. I think that one of the things that is also remarkable to see as a reaction from last week, and probably actually for the last 5 years, is that social media and modern digital communication methods have really become weaponized to create discord and inflame hate. And it's kind of a dollar short, a day late, to see Twitter and Facebook and all these platforms start to deplatform this, which we all knew was problematic. Even if it wasn't blatant, it was problematic and foundationally concerning. But the fact that we are taking away the weapons, the platform weapons of this person, this current president, soon to be ex-president, is remarkable. I think that, I saw a video from California Governor Schwarzenegger, who was talking about Kristallnacht and how him as an Austrian immigrant saw those events yesterday, and the hair in the back of his neck is like, oh my God, I'm re-witnessing things from my past, which is what I left behind when I came to America. So those two things, contemporary deplatforming of all those social media platforms, and that moment from an immigrant who has been, by all accounts, a very remarkable success story, remembering, don't forget World War II and where we came from, were two sort of bookends of my last 10 days.
Listen, this has been a wonderful conversation. I want to thank all of you. Thank you, Patrick Pariseau, Vice President of Lending and Consulting at MEDA, former founder and president of Brickwell Community Bank, headquartered in Woodbury. Thank you for the update on PPP and the EIDL, and just a survey of what is available at the state level through DEED. Thank you, Alfredo Martel, for your leadership and service at MEDA, and for the, I think, expansive offering of engagement, not only for minority or BIPOC entrepreneurs, but for bringing them together with companies that want to do right. I want to take a minute to say I am impressed with what I am seeing with major national companies leveraging their power to promote what is right in our country. And so to the degree that Twin Cities companies step forward, I want to applaud them and encourage them to bring their moral suasion and the voice of their employees and their customers to call the nation towards reconciliation and sanity as we proceed. And Peter McLaughlin, sir, thank you for your leadership, your history of engagement, of vision, let's stay in touch and keep this conversation going.
Great. Thanks for the opportunity, Al.
Thank you all. I'm Al McFarlane, and we'll see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.